thank you everyone for joining in today. I am so pleased that you're with us. We had a tremendous morning of sessions, and if you missed them, I hope you go back and see the sessions online. I want to thank you all. This was an inspiration from my late husband, Dick Krajewski. Many of you knew him. Some of you did not. If you didn't, and we were together at the workshop, you'd be going home with a bibliography and with all kinds of goodies from him. He loved adopting people and making new friends and helping to resource folks. And something that he was really adamant about was that we didn't invite people to a table. We built a new table together, a table that made sense for the people who were gathered. And if the table didn't make sense, we wove a mat to be on the ground, or we found a soft piece of grass to lay on. So Dick was an unusual guy in that this was part of his family. Everybody has different parts within their family. This natural hazards was definitely a very key part of his family, along with Rising Voices. And with that family, we need to look at and honoring our ancient ones that went before us, and to invite in those who are coming after us. And so in a traditional protocol, I want to thank the people who are the givers of this land that is underneath me, which is the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Takapa, Ishtak, Kawasha people. And we're all connected virtually. So I think through the airwaves, we want to thank the cosmos of all creation, all existence. And then also part of the protocol is having a chair, reminding us that the empty chair is that chair of all of our ancestors that have gone before. And on this chair, particularly today, I have books that Dick was in the process of reading. He was always reading lots of books and handing them out to people. And there's also the peace cranes that were given to him to honor him, and a picture of him, the old geezer there himself holding up a barn. So this is to honor the work that he has done, but not so much him as it is the purpose of it, and that is to stimulate ideas so that we can, as a family, heal and grow together and bring about the joy. And at that, I am going to pass it over for a blessing from Kalani. Thank you.
Mahalo mai kaunalipo, mai kaunalipo, mai kahikina, mai kaulana. Ye hele mai oi, ye kue, hele mai yanei, e Dick Krajewski. E hele mai e kanaha, e kalae, e kanawai. E ho mai ka ike mai nuna mai e. O nā mea huna noea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna noea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai ka ike mai luna mai e. O nā mea huna noea o nā mele. E ho mai, e ho mai, e ho mai, e a kaka ua manao, a kaka manao io. Clear in our thoughts, clear in our thinking, the wisdom of the ancestors with us for Dick. You know, Dick was inspirational. That's different than being aspirational. Aspirational is when you're talking about what's possible in the future. You know, we all got to kiss a little aspiration every once in a while. The thing about Dick is he wanted to talk about what was going on now, today. What are we doing about it now? What is the important point now? That for me was always inspirational. That's why Margaret said he's always welcomed at the conversation, right? It's like we're talking about it now. I'm glad to be here with you now. Mahalo, Dick. Mahalo, Christina. Mahalo to you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kalani. I'm going to take just a second and talk about a little bit of our process, and then Julie is going to introduce the people that are talking. So our intent is to sort of do real-time interpretation and translation of what's being said, knowing that we all use words in different ways and we all hear them in different ways, and sometimes we talk across each other. And so Jason and I are going to try to do some sort of real-time interpretation translation in the chat. I'm thinking about, for example, what emergency managers might hear, or what folks who work for government might hear, right? Just sort of these different ways of thinking and hearing and speaking. And we're gonna try to do some translation. Hopefully that will work out. And after Julie introduces the speakers and they share, at the end, we're gonna do something special. We're going to do the Krajewski kerfuffle that Lorna has pulled together. And this is gonna be an interactive activity, a joyful activity, with noise and with youth, for those of us that have, you know, our kids around that can join in, so that we can really come full circle. We can start by honoring the ancestors, and we can end with the hope and the joy of youth making noise. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Julie.
Thank you to Chris and Mariah and Kalani and Alessandra. Yes, I think as we're getting started here, if there's any bags under my eyes, it's mostly because of Dick, because all those books that are sitting there, he used to put them like under my bed and on top of my bed, on top of my pillow. So it was really, really hard to get to bed at night. So that is all you, Dick. Thank you. Yeah, and so we're here today really in gathering around this idea when we were coming together as a group and thinking about what is it that's really, you know, that calls to mind the first thing that calls to mind when we think about Dick. And it's, you know, he was always known for saying this idea of enough is abundance. And I think many of us on here have heard him say that. And as time has passed, this has continued to develop new meaning for me in so many ways, that it's his kind of own way, right, of continuing to tap on that wall to make sure we're paying attention. You know, in this way, he reminded us that when we live as if we already have enough, we live sustainably and in ways that help lift oppression and reduce inequality and injustice. And what we're doing here today in this session, and the inspiration behind this is bringing a variety of people together from these diverse and intersecting places of Dick's and also Chris's life for this really intergenerational conversation about hope and healing. And we invite you to join us in this dialogue. And the folks we have with us today are going to be speaking to this idea of what are the questions for this community, the hazards community, to be questioning and to be asking. And how can asking those questions and knowing what to ask motivate change to move our systems of research and practice toward more equitable futures for all. So not a tall order at all for the next hour. And we will get into it with, so the folks we have joining us today to speak are Mariah Ben Joseph from in Hawaii, and everyone will be giving better introductions of themselves, just letting you know who is on with us. Lorna Jarrett Blanchard in Pennsylvania, May Nguyen in California, along with her mother, Tui Nguyen in California as well. We have Brian and Juan Parras in Houston, Texas. David Rico in Washington, D.C. Kalani Sosa in Hawaii. And Chris and Dick's grandson, Desi Sinan in Hawaii. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lorna to be starting us off in reflecting about the kind of the framing question for this session, gifted to us by Dick.
Thank you, Julie. That was powerful listening to you, Kalani. Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for inviting us to honor Dick. He built a beautiful table, so let's dress it and tell you how to join us. Dick was a dangerous man, a man dangerous in sheep's clothing. He was educated, thinking, and learning, yet dressed and most comfortable as the man from Appalachia. It gave him the uncanny ability to walk into one's heart or a meeting looking quite harmless. His glint of determination was to plant seeds to create paradigm shifts, or if need be, words to humble. Then with a twist, he would smile and welcome you into his world. But the disruption was done, the seed was planted. He was a man on a mission for change for the purpose of justice equality, a mission too large for one person, one group, one scientific field, but a mission that requires all of us, every one of us to join. We are all needed to move his agenda forward. His dangerous words began with, "Have you thought of?" The hook. Next, the discussion, formalizing the problem. To then his famous words, "What are you going to do about it?" The gotcha. His goal, to awaken a person's inner justice warrior, or better stated, clarity, complexity of emotion, and empathy. Through honoring each person, their talents and wisdom, he created a dangerous group, us, working to transmute injustice into equality. Justice equality is not convoluted. Its meaning is simple. It mandates thoughtful action to create good transformative change. On our latest adventure of thought, he joined me in a world that is in plain view, but often unseen. A community that struggles with labels, often called special needs. Yeah. They wear medical, societal, and governmental tags, targeted by bullies and evil, negligence, and apathy. We started sharing ideas and formulating thought. Then, in a shock, a quick diagnosis, a fast goodbye, and then he walked on. So today I begin. Please join me to begin. Dick, I have pulled out your tool bag. I am implementing your ways. I am learning and listening, pondering and visualizing outcomes, rethinking, tweeting, and gathering more knowledge. As the crystallization begins, I wonder who will join us? Who will join us in this cohort? To work like Dick, you must open to the above while curiously watching the twists and turns of the surround. Redefine the individual and the organizational no's to yes, I think we can, I know we can. In my work, we come together with one purpose, lift up the community to create a path for a good life, while mitigating behaviors and policies that could be limiting, endangering, or fatal. So what is justice equality in practice? An overwhelming idea that none of us can be responsible for, yet each of us, you and I, can be a participant of. We can choose to be the caretaker for disruptive, procedural, cultural, representative, or capacities justice. That lifts us up and weaves the societal safety net. Thus, how do you walk with the spirit and swag of Dick Krajewski? To bastardize Toni Morrison, If you take your titles and your race and you pick them up and set them aside and stand in the nakedness of self, who are you? Good, bad, open, closed, a part of the power structure and or a gate to the funding? Do you, or in your position, promote or hinder justice, equality? I'm asking you, each of you. Just one more seed to plant. From Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmerer, she writes, I once met an engineering student visiting from Europe who told me excitedly about going ricing in Minnesota with his friends, the Ojibwe family. They were on the lake by dawn, and all day long they pulled through the rice beds, knocking the ripe rice into the canoe. It didn't take long to collect quite a bit, he reported, but it's not very efficient. At least half of the rice just falls in the water, and they don't seem to care. It's wasted. Personally, I enjoyed learning the young man was thoughtful and drew a blueprint of a gadget to gather rice more efficiently. Dr. Kimmerer makes this point so succinctly. His host listened respectfully, then said, yes, we could get more that way, but it's got to seed itself next year, and what we leave behind is not wasted. You know, we're not the only ones who like rice. I am asking each of you to consider justice, equality like rice. First, set aside your prescribed thoughts in the act of humility. Listen to others' ancestral tradition. Seek to understand differences and be open to reimagine and define success.
Mom,
Let practice a good harvest.
Mom.
And second, babe, become dangerous
My
people
God.
together of good disruption. And remember, enough is abundance. Please listen to my fellow panel members and join us. Represent your justice well. Help us improve. Enough is abundance. Thank you.
Your turn.
Thank you so much, Lorna, for planting the seed of this session and calling to mind much of Dick's teachings over the years, which he would have appreciated above and beyond through the literary word that you pulled into this. Thank you. Would someone else from the panel, I can always call on someone, but if someone feels inspired to be stepping up next to speak and share.
Oh, now come on, someone.
I think a bit of what Lorna shared was also in thinking about, you know, what are the questions to be posing to this community to really think about the actions moving forward towards justice and equity and equality, that these aren't just words that we're throwing out into the atmosphere. You know, and that was what Dick most profoundly did so often, right? Was he brought you into this conversation where you thought, where the heck are we flying off to? Only to walk away down the road, and as you're walking, realize that he was giving you that direction as to here are some of the actually grounded actions to be moving forward with. But you need to be thoughtful about that process, that it's not just given to you, it's hard work. There has to be real motivation and intent behind that, and it's not just words you're putting out there. And I'd love to hear, look like David, you were kind of leaning forward there, if you'd like to reflect from what your mom started off with.
Thank you. Hello, I'm David Rico. I'm Lorna's son. Yeah, Mom and I talked a lot about like what is the legacy of Dick, and I think a lot of that lies in primarily his education into his spot his particular place in the world, and that realizing as an educated white man representing justice, he was invited into a lot of rooms that held power. And we have to think about science as the language of power, that science often gives and distributes resources to communities whose voices are not taken seriously on their own. We briefly described conversations with the elders and the grandmothers and how we seem to walk around with this innate understanding that they are our leaders and the ones who speak for us. However, when entering into rooms where we are requesting justice and a shared resources and help post disasters, people do not take the words of the grandmas seriously. They do not take the words of the women or the gender variant or the other seriously. They look to the world of science to represent truth. And in that position of representing truth and power, and the difference between life-saving resources and life-taking resources, Dick understood this, and it created, I think, a deep itch inside of him, a deep issue where he was disturbed by the position that he was placed in, and probably thought that it was not just as a single person to carry that much power. And in response to this deep disturbance, started actively turning on other people and calling upon them to join him as he spoke and as he interacted, and create new spaces where they could be safe to speak freely and thrive. So I think that is one of the key monuments of understanding how we can try to emulate the good that Dick did, which is to look inside of ourselves and our own privileges. And privilege is not necessarily a negative thing. It's just, where do you have power that others do not? Where have you been comfortable where others have been bothered? Where are you stable where others are still seeking stability? And what do you have that others may need and or desire? Honoring that and then turning it as gifts to other people, especially within the scientific and the disaster communities. There's so much teaching to remain impartial, as if impartialness grants you immunity from your own personal desires, when in fact impartialness is often turning off the spiritual sections of yourself and your soul and denying yourself the emotion and the human and animal nature that we're all born into. We are not impartial creatures. And sometimes in that desire to be impartial, we commit egregious acts of injustice. So I'll close out my little section with this. I'm a cook, I'm a line cook. I'm also a gardener and a planter and a seed keeper. And I was at a chef's conference in Denmark hosted by a restaurant called Noma. And the theme of this conference was talking about feeding the world. And when we say we're going to feed the world, we are committing ourselves to a place of power over you. When I say I'm going to feed you, I'm taking power from you. I'm holding power over you. And so the question that we left that conference was not how do we feed the world, but how do we empower the world to feed itself? Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And, you know, with that question, I wonder, Brian, and your experience of, you know, in your relationship with Chris and Dick started, you know, in hurricane recovery efforts, you know, not just recently, but for, I think you all met during, was it Katrina or before, well before then, during Katrina?
Post Katrina, yeah.
Post Katrina. And I'm curious, you know, if there's, especially reflecting on, you know, what David just shared of, you know, if that resonating with you and, you know, what you'd like to add to that.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, David, for your words, and everyone listening My name's Brian Parras. I live in Houston, Texas. And I have been working on environmental justice issues for the last 20 years since I got out of college and came back home and realized that, you know, this energy sector had really impacted my life, and not just my life from the time that I was born and raised in the city here, but even my parents, you know, and as an infant, and a being in my mom's womb, and even further than that, my mom and her mom's womb, and they all grew up in West Texas in the Permian Basin, you know, which remains to this day one of the largest sites of extraction of fossil fuels. And, you know, you can't escape that presence when it's so deeply embedded in your culture for generations. And so, you know, that brings up a lot. It brings up a lot. And I think for me, in this conversation in particular, and thinking of Dick's legacy and, you know, the process of questioning and understanding, there's been so much. There's been so much. And me personally, I think, you know, the hardest thing for me has been to honor my elders, you know, my parents, my grandparents, and follow their direction. But what has happened is, you know, a lot of what was asked of me has put me in situations where, you know, I've been taught, you know, the dominant culture, and we've been asked to, you know, participate in the dominant culture, and in that process, you know, I think a lot of young folks get lost, because that dominant culture does not respect, honor, or even want, you know, you to keep any of it. In fact, it's been, you know, set up to destroy and eradicate all of your parents and grandparents and, you know, indigenous cultures identity completely. You know, since day one, that's been the goal. um, and so in attempting to understand how this world works, it's been like the hardest thing, I think, for me has been to navigate those waters, and to not feel like my parents and my grandparents were wrong about trying to understand this world, even though it put me, you know, in a position where I felt like, you know, things that they said, things that they believed, things that they did, you know, were wrong or stupid or, you know, all of the things, right? All of the negative attributes that we hear from mainstream culture about people's lifeways, right? That don't fit in with the capitalism. And all of that sort of really came out in a big way after Hurricane Harvey, because it was, you know, such a extreme event that I think all of us were forced to reckon with, you know, our belief systems, and it opened up an opportunity for us to listen to each other in a different way. And that's been, you know, something that has fed me, to use the metaphor that David mentioned before, to this day, you know, and it's been a big part of how I've tried to pivot and lead my life, even now. And it's not been an easy journey, but it's one that has made me much more at peace and comfortable. And, you know, it's a continual process. So even right now, you know, I think, you know, the basic things that we've all been taught from our grandparents, so wash your hands, cover your mouth, you know, all of the very, very basic things that we have been taught to protect others, you know, to be respectful of others, and to respect ourselves is what, you know, we're told by science is the proper way to contain this pandemic that we're all in. And those basic things are just so difficult for people, you know, and they've used science and, you know, made up conditions, and made up medicines, um, to prevent us from doing, you know, the basic of things. And so, you know, I just am always trying to find that balance between, anecdotal and, you know, hard evidence. And I've worked with researchers a lot in our work, but I've always had to remember to trust, you know, people's personal experience, who live right on the front lines, and I'll always do that, you know. And I think the science is just way too slow, and it often proves what people have experienced, you know, and have been saying for decades and centuries. But I just hope, you know, for me, thinking of the kids underneath, you know, me now, I'm 43, that there's some learning in both directions, so that we can make it better, as our elder started off the call with. You know, that's our charge, to always improve and to learn, you know, to continuously learn. So I'll leave it at that. And I think that, you know, sits well with what Dick asked of all of us, right? The best we can do is learn, and to keep that knowledge, you know, keep that knowledge moving forward. Yeah, thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Brian. And, you know, and that, yeah, that is one of our charges, both individually and collectively, right? Thinking about what has been our own learning process, what has been the learning process in our families, in our communities, and this natural hazards community, and then as the bigger collective. And so I think that that's a really distinct challenge for everyone here to be reflecting on continuously, because we're all learning as students all the time through this. I'm curious to, you know, May, with, you know, you and your mom, Toy, you know, thinking about some learning process you've gone through, and, you know, the work you've done with Chris and Dick since, you know, back in Louisiana and now being out in California, if you'd like to share some of your reflections on that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this, and just the framing of everything has been so thoughtful. And, you know, the framing of the conversation, I think it really honors Dick, from the planning process to the conversation, to the dialogue style, from the opening. I mean, it really feels like him. It really does. So thank you so much for this. And so my mom is on the phone, and so I've been translating with her here. Má, thì bây giờ tới phiên mình nói rồi nè, thì con vừa mới nói họ rằng là con cảm ơn họ cái cách mà họ lập ra cái chương trình này cho mọi người á. Thì bây giờ con nói trước rồi xong rồi tận Má nói nhé. Okay. And so a little background. I got to meet Chris and Dick through my work at the Mary Queen of Vietnam Community Development Corporation in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. And then after the BP oil spill, again, we kind of reconvened. It was the disasters kept bringing us back together. And I think and then we just stayed together. I guess it was like, well, you never know when another disaster might happen, so we should just stay together. But I think, just to share a memory of Dick, I remember I was doing mostly organizing in our Vietnamese immigrant community. And then as our issues started finding allies in other communities, Chris actually started developing some of those connections with the other communities. And that was when I met a lot of the indigenous groups in Louisiana, and brought with me, our community groups, and we're mostly fishers in New Orleans, and so the indigenous communities, that was, I think that bridge in our relationship has been really transformational in the way, at least for me, how I carry out my work in our community. So after the BP oil spill, there was a loss of subsistence use issue that we had in our community because our fishers were had been using seafood to feed the community, to feed each other, to barter and to feed the family. And about 17,000 of these claims were denied by the claim administrator after the BP oil spill, claiming that, that doesn't exist. We were invisible to them. This was not a market use. It wasn't even a non-market use. They were like, this is like Stone Age activity that you're claiming. So to them, like, our immigrant community didn't exist from that perspective. And, this connection with the indigenous communities really validated our use of seafood and our subsistence use. But it didn't just like validate it, and it didn't help, but it also paved the legal and policy, and provided the legal and policy recommendations and the pathway for us to even make the claim. So that connection bore, obviously, like, incredible fruit for our community on so many different levels. After a natural disaster, I remember one of our fishers, a leader, who said, they spilled on us like we didn't exist. And then, like, they damaged our fishing ground like we didn't exist. And then they paid us as if we were worth nothing. And that was when bonding and building out these connections with so many of the other groups, like historic Black communities, Byron's community that Chris also worked with. Chris actually organized for a whole group of us, Chris and Dick and several folks organized for our different community groups to go to Alaska, actually. So, like, not only did she extend our community reach, and Chris and Dick extend our community reach to other communities in Louisiana, they then connected us up through Alaska, where we were able to engage in an exchange. Like, it was, it was so, you don't realize that you're even doing it until after you do it. Like, you go home and you're like, I think it's exactly what you described, Julie, where, you walk away from the conversation and you're like, oh yes, like, this is what I'm supposed to do now. And so I feel like those networks carry with them just an incredible amount of knowledge, and it's like a pathway for so much, like, deep exchange with outcomes, which are, for me, I mean, I'm very focused on, well, like, where does this lead us to? And in fact, in that case, it led us to claims that totaled a little over $20 million for our communities across Louisiana for this use that was entirely denied, and a sense of visibility that was that's just, I think that was the part that was immeasurable for a lot of people, that was like priceless and even more meaningful. And then the relationships continued to blossom. And I think, you know, when I think about hazards and like mitigation and disaster response work, it's these existing networks are so critical. And it's something that Dick and Chris and the Lowlander Center, I think, works on consistently. You know, they work on it like we do movement work, right? It's when you're building pathways in the dark and trusting that the sun will rise in the morning. And it's consistent. So I've started since then attending a lot of community cultural events in like Pointe-a-Chen, like in like way outside of my community. And it was because it takes nurturing. You have to maintain it. You have to trust that these pathways are worth building, because the sun will rise and we will know that we built the path by walking it. And I recall this one time when Dick, we were like, I think they were building like several things, and Dick was, he was using like a power saw and he had just injured his thumb. So I think it was like I think we ended up having to ice the thumb and like take it to the hospital. And it would just, I mean, when you say committed, right? There's like, some people make contributions. Chris, like Dick commits. I think when I saw that, I just remember thinking, like, he's the person that'll jump in the hole with you because he's gotten out of it before. He's seen other people get out. He's going to help you get out of it. So it just, I remember that so well. But it was, yes, just so grateful for the work that Dick did and the partnership I think Chris, you and Dick have, because I think that partnership really spilled over and so many of us have benefited from it. And like in such a practical way, which is, I feel like that diminishes its value, but it's also, it's worth mentioning. It has incredibly practical, real, measurable results. So I don't mean to diminish it by acknowledging that, but it does. And that's what I'll say. And just so grateful to be here. And now, okay, Matt sửa soạn chưa? Tới phiên Matt rồi nè. Okay, Matt muốn nói sao? Thì Matt bây giờ họ muốn Matt chia sẻ về những cái công việc của Matt làm trong những cái thời gian khó khăn và cái trồng cải, cái ý nghĩa của nó.
Được rồi, đi lên nói nha.
Matt bắt đầu đi.
Hi everyone. I am happy I can coming with program with my daughter, and I very like program because I want to share you something. I don't know what heading you want talking.
Má muốn nói tiếng Việt con thông dịch cho. Nếu má muốn nói tiếng Việt con có thể thông dịch, hay là má có thể nói tiếng Anh, không sao.
Đang nói tiếng Mỹ này.
Okay, má nói tiếng Việt. She's asking, do you understand? Is okay?
Can I speak English? Somebody understand what I say?
Họ nói họ hiểu.
Okay. Because I taught my daughter tell me about I can come in with you for talk introduction my working before. You know, if you work like that for I can take 7 children only in my house. I roll up something, vegetable, sometimes don't have food. I go in the yard. I fix up, come, I eat it. But I learned by my mom. And I can roll up by myself, but no anybody can do it. Because some people, they got good hand. They can roll up something, they roll up. When somebody put the sea in the back, die, no roll up. Anybody can do it.
Má muốn con giới thiệu cái công trình, má muốn con giới thiệu cái chương trình của má không?
Chương trình gì?
Cái mà má trồng cây rồi cái chương trình ở New Orleans á, cái chợ trồng hổm á. Con giới thiệu.
Má là tự vì má với bà là chồng cứ đưa ra chợ trồng hổm bán á. Con nói đi. Từ đầu tiên nó bỏ ra
My
cái chương
mom
trình là đầu tiên.
and my
Đầu
grandma.
tiên là người Việt Nam tới, để tao nói tiếng Việt.
Okay.
First time I come refugee, I come in Louisiana, New Orleans, very hard to the income. No have a job. Everyone and my mom say about why everybody need họ có hiểu tiếng Mỹ không?
Are you
Everybody needs a
still
vegetable.
understanding? She's asking.
How can get a vegetable and share with all my people, and my mama foresee something, putting it down. Then they grow up. I say go to free market, sell. Everybody together. They very happy. They go home, they grow up too. Họ cắt những cái cọng á,
Vâng.
những cái cọng rau mà mình bán họ
Dạ.
cắt lấy. Họ cắt lấy cái chui đó rồi họ lại đưa về họ vào trồng
Họ lại trồng nữa. Okay, để con dịch cái đó cho họ nhé. So the part she wanted to make sure you understood was, so my mom and my grandparents came to the United States as refugees, and they settled in New Orleans. And at that time, they were sent out to, they went out to New Orleans East, and there was no food. Like, people just didn't have money to access food. And that was when my grandmother, who knew how to plant and did agriculture back in Vietnam, was able to start doing the planting in New Orleans. And she's the one who taught my mom how to do planting. My mom says, but not everyone who plants a seed, it will grow. But apparently her and my grandma's seeds grow. But, and they would plant it, and then they would take it with my aunt, and that was how they started the squatting market, the Saturday morning market in New Orleans of Vietnamese vegetables. And so that was and then what would happen is they would take their bushel to the market and sell it, and then other people would buy it, but they would trim it off to the very bottom piece, and then those people would take the bottom piece and start planting it as well. And that was how a bunch of the community gardens started happening, because a lot of people can't plant from seed. That was what she was saying. Like, it was also to say not everyone is capable of this, but also to say that if other people aren't capable of it, you can take it from seed, and then when you sell it on the market and you trade it with other people, they can take your it's called cái khúc đó. So I don't even know the translation for that, actually. Yeah, and then those people took that. The clippings, yes. Yes, so they would take the clippings, and that was how more gardens started happening, and then more people started showing up to sell and trade, and they would start trading. That was how they started diversifying their crops, and that was how that was where the farmers market started, and then they started selling other goods through it.
Rồi họ đi chợ Mỹ, họ mua những cái squat á, họ ăn được cái hột là họ về họ trồng. Nó lên.
And then they would go to the, like, she says, like, the white market, and then they would buy like American produce, and then they would save those seeds and they would plant it. But a lot of the seeds were also just Vietnamese seeds that some people brought along.
So they grow up,
and that's how they grow up.
They grow up, they got that food in you again.
And that's how you get food. In a hazard, in a disaster. Simple. There you go. That should answer all the science's questions, I think. Má nói như là dễ, đơn giản lắm, má biểu. That's it. Vậy thôi xong.
Thì bảo bà đó bây giờ má trồng.
Easy, she says.
Cái hột đó, má ăn trong cái hột đó, má thấy cái quả nó to quá, má thèm quá, má bỏ trong, má trồng nhiều nó lên một cây, quá nhiều trái luôn.
She says if you pay attention to the plants, if you're paying attention, you'll know how to pick your plants.
And if you eat it, you know how to pick them. You know how to pick which one's worth growing. So you got to be someone who eats it, and you have to be someone who pays attention. So, and pear trees, and you can grow them into trees, which will give you more. Okay. Okay. But make sure you eat it too. You have to be the person who eats it. This can't be done by other people who give you seeds. Make sure it's the people who eat it. They're the ones who will know what's best to eat and grow. All right. Xong chưa má?
Xong rồi bây giờ nhưng mà bảo bà đó là không có một câu ví là những người mà người đói á, những người nghèo á, những người đói á, là do tỷ dụ là những người họ không có được siêng và họ cũng không có được chịu trồng, biết trồng.
Okay.
Trồng như vậy họ không sống được.
Okay, con nói lại thôi. Okay, I'm just going to translate this. I'm just translating. Okay, this is not an interpretation. My mom said, some people, she just wants to leave you with one last thought, which is that you can't be lazy. And there are lazy, this is not, like, you can't be lazy. And lazy people plant and it will not grow. That is just a translation. Some people, lots of people will not know how to do it. But you can't be lazy. Okay, xong rồi má, mình xong rồi. Okay, we are done. Thank you. My mom said if we are done, we're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, May and Toy, for those stories and wisdom, and carrying us through from Lorna talking about planting the seed, and David with the food. And I do have to say that I'm not entirely sure that Dick had the greenest of thumbs. He was really good at giving instructions about where to plant something and how you should be digging the hole while he had his feet up on the deck. And I do remember getting to that gathering and being like, where's Chris and Dick? And someone be like, his thumb's on ice. It's fine. They're on their way to get it fixed. Okay. And I think, some of the what you raise in those stories is thinking about, the relationships and connections from our neighbors up to finding those connections to, going to Alaska and not even realizing what that connection even meant sometimes until you're on your way home and still feeling that, and so I think if we kind of may travel down the coast a bit from where May is up in San Francisco, we'll stop in Central California. I'll say hello, hi. We'll keep going south of here, across the waves a bit. And I'd like to bring Desi into this, who, besides being direct family, also was brought into this greater family through the connections that Chris and Dick and the Lowlander Center made with Olahana and Lomakai, and bringing youth from Louisiana to Hawaii, and that Desi was part of those knowledge exchanges and trainings and learning. And Desi, if you'd like to share some of your thoughts too, and thinking about a lot of this translational piece that we've been discussing.
Hi everyone. Yeah, Dick's Grandpa Dick just was a great influence in everywhere from how I even perceive the world to all the different kinds of knowledge I look towards. And it's very wonderful that I was able to make so many connections through him and through Grandma Chris, and be able to work and expand myself, as well as be more useful and helpful to the people around me through what I do. And I think that one thing I really, really admire about Grandpa Dick was his ability to talk to you like an equal, no matter who he was talking to. He was able to just share his knowledge, but without making it seem like it's from a top-down perspective, where he has knowledge to share with you and he respects what you have to say as much as what he has to say. And I think that's really important when every aspect of life, especially if you're working with communities, if you're working with natural hazard relief or disaster relief. It's because I've been on board for neighborhood boards, and I've been in communities organizing different events or different plans and projects, from anywhere from just natural hazards to just neighborhood boards to the LGBT events and communities, to even being able to work on Peace Boat through the Ohana Foundation. And Kalani trained me really well for that. But yeah, it's no matter where, and I'm very privileged that I'm in between so many different things. I'm a part of so many different things, and it's really important to understand the vocabularies and the knowledge that we have, and respect and understand our place in the world, because we're always all of us are having difficulties and suffering in one way or another, but there's always someone else that's more in need of help, that's more in need of assistance, that's less heard than you are, that's less privileged than you are. And it's not to say that you don't have anything for yourself, but it's good to understand where you're coming from and where your place is when you're speaking about different struggles. And I think that Grandpa Dick did that extremely well, being able to talk to people and being able to talk with them and understand and share the knowledges that they had. Just like how David was saying about feeding someone puts you in a position of power over them. It's not so when we all talk about our experiences and knowledge, it's Grandpa Dick was very, very good at not feeding his knowledge to you, but sharing the meal that he had with you, you know, as an equal, as someone that's just as important at the table as he is. And just like how May and I don't know where he went, but Brian was saying about how they felt disenfranchised and how they felt very unheard when dealing with the higher organizations like the government or relief organizations, how they felt unheard, and how their knowledge and how their how what they had to say was somehow lesser than what they had to say. And yeah, it's something that I'm trying to work on as well, but it's something I'm very vocal about in whoever I'm working with, whatever organization I'm participating with. That a lot of times the context of our life, the experiences that we had gives us a different vocabulary, a different value we set on ourselves about what we know, what we think, who we are. And there's differences between all of us, but difference doesn't mean better. Difference doesn't mean superior to others. And I've had the privilege of working with academia as well, and that's the problem we run into a lot, is that people in academia, even through the words that they speak, put themselves above the people that they speak to. And it's when we're trying to make a grassroots organization, when we're trying to make something that's inclusive for everyone, it's important that we recognize how we speak, what we use, what we say, and what the context of what the words that we have to say are from, in order for people to actually understand us and actually understand the messages that we're trying to say, and vice versa. Someone may talk about decolonization or deinstitutionalization, but without the context that they have of those knowledge, someone may take it differently. And it's, especially in academia, especially when organizing community-centric grassroots projects and coalitions. It's not understanding that what we have to say is not going to be heard in the same way that others, in the same way that we hear our own words is important. And yeah, I think he did that very, very well. I think a lot of you have known Grandpa Dick longer than I've been alive, actually. But yeah, even in the short amount of time that I'm here and in the short amount of time that I was able to know him, he was able to impart so much knowledge, and more than that, a way to take in knowledge, process it, and share it with others. That's so much more than any lecturer, any professor, any speaker could ever do, which was to help me process the world differently and help me respect others differently. And I think that, that's something that everyone can always learn. And yeah, sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but yes.
Thank you so much, Desi. And, a lot of what you spoke about, thinking about that respect, right? That mutual trust and respect and that responsibility that we all have. And I think, a connection to those, again, those collaborations and relationships that have been built based on that shared respect and responsibility we feel together. And a couple of the folks with us as well, coming back to a different part of Hawaii from where Desi is, have embodied that more than just about anyone else on this planet. So Mariah and Kalani, if there's further reflections that you would like to share.
I supposed to be turning it over to the girl, but listening to all you folks speak about Dick, it brings a lot of stuff to mind. I remember when Dick and you invited me over to the Natural Hazards Conference because he wanted me to meet Margaret Davison. How funny was that, right? I sit down at the table and me and Margaret start talking about things we've talked about for like 20 years, right? And Dick goes, "You already know each other?" It's like, yeah, kinda. I got sick and I ended up getting ready to die. And in that time, Margaret came to see me, Bob came to see me, and Dick came to see me. And I can't help but notice that all three of them have crossed over, kind of like Pat. The old people, they say, it's easier to pull a rope than it is to push one. So when they cross over on the other side, they can pull us along, drag along the projects and get us there. So I spend a lot of my days talking to the three of them, staying on track, getting ready for my own crossing. This is what we do. And what I've heard from everyone is the relational component. So it's no secret, Chris knows. When Dick and I talk, we're students. It's weird to be in a university lecturing to a master's class feeling like, they're all sitting there looking at you like you're supposed to know something, right? It's like when me and Dick are sitting down and hoisting a beer, we're both freshmen again looking at it going, well, I don't know, what the fuck? What do you think is going on? What's happening? And our relationships demonstrate this willingness to keep investigating. I feel really pleased to look at all of you. Mahalo, thank your mom. I couldn't agree more. You know what I mean? You can't just dig a hole and throw something in. It doesn't work that way. You have to be in relationship with it. You have to understand. It has to know you. You have to know it. We're family. I really respect that thought we heard. Dick would have respected it. It's not just the two-legged that use the fresh water, right? It's not just the two-legged that need the clean air and the clean water and the good environment. The wild rice has to be shared with everyone. The fish we used to eat, it was the one we caught. Right, we didn't decide between salmon and tuna, and it's like, I'm sorry, you ate the fish you caught, and you were really glad that you caught a fish. Otherwise, you're only eating onions. It's like, what's going on, right? This used to be the world less than 50 years ago. Less than 50 years ago. Our relationship now is, I can eat a watermelon any time of the year. I can walk down to the grocery store and purchase it, but I'm not in relationship with it. So, Mariah and them are working on the farm, eating and feeding and living. And these are just lessons we're trying to learn. And when Dick was here, and God bless him, coming all that way to see me, thank you, Chris. I mean, what can I say, right? It's like, I miss them. I miss the guys that make me feel like I'm 19 again, and I don't understand it, and I don't see it, and give me another puff on that joint. God damn it, what's going on around here? It's like, all of this is the expression of our lives. All of this is part of the relationship trail that we build, that becomes so important to our lives. And thinking about Dick, all this last week, coming up to this. In case those of you don't know, I work for FEMA, right? I'm the community outreach specialist and trainer for the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, right? These guys, Anniston, Alabama, are you kidding me? That's the Gestapo. And they pay me. They pay me every 2 weeks, right? It's like, oh my God, right? So what is a natural hazard? Dick and I would say, it's only a hazard because the people are standing there. Otherwise, it's a natural event. It's a natural process, right? It's like, but we build our houses right on that cliffside for the lovely view. We put ourselves in harm's way because we don't understand the relationship. That's one aspect. But you listen to May's story. You listen to how, as institutions, we victimize each other. Don't call it a natural hazard. It's a man-made disaster. The other word applies. It's a disaster. And it was done to us because they see us as less than the other, because we have not attended to relationship. So those of us who are in the fight, and it is a fight, we have to remember to fight smartly, right? Attend to the relationships that give us the leverage, that enable us, as Dick said, to get in the room. If you're not getting in the room in the first place, well, Bob Goff used to say, if you ain't at the table, you're on the menu. You know what I mean? So make sure, you guys, make sure you get us to the table. You know what I mean? Brian, David, May, Lorna, do whatever you got to do to get to the table. You know what I mean? Get there. Make them hear us. I believe in you guys. I believe in Mariah, even though she don't say nothing.
Okay, well, I guess I'll have to interrupt. I just want to say mahalo for having me here. My relationship with Dick is, I think, more from him pulling the rope from the other side. I didn't get to have as much of a deep relationship with him. I saw him a couple of times and listened to his words at the Rising Voices conferences that we had the pleasure to attend. And, just listening to all of you reflect on him and what he brought forward in the individual and in the group is really just something that is something that I value so much from elders and from peers and from children, is this curiosity and this vibrant nature of life and how to really look at it from all these different angles, right? And so Kalani and I were speaking this morning about there's always somebody 180 degrees from you, and that is how it has to be, because we're all looking in at the bowl together. We're all looking in at this, the umeke, the poi bowl, the bowl of soup, and there's always somebody who's right across that you're eating your soup and you're going, I see you. But where that conflict is the opportunity for positive change. And I think something that is really, what I'm hearing a lot of is that Dick was not afraid of having these conflicts. He was not afraid of bringing out these conversations that might be somewhat uncomfortable. And something that I really want to bring to the group here, the Natural Hazards workshop here, is don't be afraid to reach out into your community and have these uncomfortable conversations. Don't be afraid to see what your neighbor is doing. Hey, you're doing it completely different than I am. Why? Why is it that we're having these, why are you doing something so different? And, I think that it's just something that the relationship will bring. I'm reflecting right now on a moment that I had earlier watching May. I didn't know that she was translating to her mom. I was like, what is she doing over there watching? And now I am so just reflecting on myself of wow,
you would be translating.
Right, exactly. And, so something that just to bring in the generational healing and the conversation that we're having.
Babies.
So I just wanted to really mahalo you guys and say thank you, and make sure you know that we're not afraid of these conflicts, and we're not afraid of these conversations, and we're not afraid of going out into the community and building that relationship, because we may be thinking that one thing is happening and we are sure that that thing is happening, and then we have a completely different view. We're flipped 180 degrees on that bowl and we see something from a completely different perspective. So that's something that is extremely helpful when looking at natural hazards and when looking at disaster preparedness. What happens if something completely different happens that we were not at all expecting? And so, hearing these conversations and seeing all of you here, I think that that's something that Dick was really pushing for and is pulling us towards from the other side. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you all for these. I feel like I just want to dwell in this space for the rest of the week or the year, or just makes it a better 2020, huh? Coming from this, there's a question posed earlier in the dialogue about, questioning is justice possible in a fundamentally unjust system, and thinking about, should we move beyond justice toward collective liberation or something else? And I'm curious, if anyone on the panel would just like to share for a couple of minutes your reflection thinking about that, right? Of, is justice possible? Do we?
You guys know I'm a justice guy, right? And I've been known in lectures to say that there's just ice. There's no justice, right? It's like they just want us to chill out. They just want everybody to cool down and be cool. You know what I mean? Don't get out of hand. Hey, come on in here, especially you, Apu. See, here's my justice warriors. Everybody's in training, right? So here's the thing. Change is constant. The dominant narrative knows this. It has to work to suspend us in static. And that's why we get all the static we get, right? But the status quo, we don't have to worry about rising up. The change is inevitable. It's sitting all around me. I'm sure you guys got them all around you. I love that Lorna had the babies right there the whole time, right? The change is Brian, is, Alessandra, is May, is Desi. The change is inevitable.
I agree. Justice is going to be redefined. We're only working with the words we know now.
Ew.
but we can change them if we work forward. It may start small, but we just keep going forward, because otherwise the problem's too big. And how do you tackle it?
Hey,
So,
look around, you guys. It always starts small.
yes,
It always starts small, and then it grows.
yes.
My apologies for stepping away for a moment. Were folks still responding on this, or?
Yeah, I got little ones learning
We
technique.
caught you.
You know, I was thinking with this question too, there's one of my last times with Dick in person was we were in a gathering space in Point of Shen that many of you have been to. And there was like 50 or 60 people in this space. There was a lot going on. There's all kinds of activities. And yet in this whole time, I see Dick lying in the corner, assuming he's sleeping. So I'm just like, are you kidding me right now? Yeah, so I walk over. I was going to kick him in the boot, and realized he wasn't sleeping, although he did have, the newspaper pulled behind his head, was kind of laying back. And the whole time through all of this, he was staring at one of my kids playing with, I think it was a leg of a crab that he had on the floor. And out of all of this is happening, kind of just this whole thing, and I saw, and he was there for, it had to be a couple hours doing this. And how much, despite everything, all these activities swirling around, that was where he got his energy. That was where he got his strength, and how he continued to learn, was making sure we paying attention to that younger generation that's not only learning from us, but is teaching us in the process. And what he was learning by their engagement, even before she could, clearly she doesn't stop talking now, but before she could even say words that we necessarily understood in our language. And with that, I'd love to pass it over to Lorna. First, just huge thanks for everyone who's come here to share stories. We'll continue to share stories. We'll continue to share in the legacy that Dick has given and gifted to all of us, that Chris continues to do so. And Lorna, I think, is gonna, Brian, yes.
I just wanted to say one quick comment on the question of justice, and that's that it's not a finite location, and just like the seed that May's mother explained so eloquently, you can't just put it in the ground and it'll grow on its own. La lucha sigue, always. Struggle is a way of life, and justice is a process. Yeah, so it takes work, and it takes relationships, right? All the things that we just said. Keep it in here. Let all the information be a seed, and now it's on all of us, to grow that, nurture it, water it, feed it.
We all have to take and nurture that justice that we want to push forward in this world. Sit around that bowl, as Mariah talked about, and pull each other's tensions in so that we improve this world for each of us, our families, our babies, our unseen. That is our mission as justice warriors. We can do this in our communities, and maybe it'll go bigger and bigger and bigger. That's our hope. But if we make our communities better, we are succeeding, and the next generation will hopefully take that forward. We're so serious today, but if you know Dick, he's got had the longest legs and the longest arms, and he'd stretch those things out, and he would start from the belly, and he would work up, and he would start laughing. And he would laugh, and he would have fun. He was not always this serious Polish man. And he'd get on my nerves. And I would tell him, you're not always a Polish medicine man. So when I think of Dick, I like that, what you shared, Kalani. You take that rope and you hold on and you keep your mission straight and you let him start pulling us forward. Because in the last, I offered for him and he used me as a person who he could talk about with death. We walked to the river of Styx together. I told him as I let him go, I would catch him on the other side and that I would always be here for him. And I have been. So as I close, I want to get serious again. I want to talk to you in my daughter's language, an all body language. And I think that is the legacy he leaves us. Smile, think, listen, and hear with your heart the Krajewski kerfuffle. Become curious and listen to the languages because the world is calling for equality. My dear Chris, thank you for making this happen and bringing us forward.
Thank you all for making this happen. We're going to go around with the panel and everyone in their language is going to say what the joy is or the thank you is. So go ahead, Julie, get us around.
Hello. We'll go over to May.
Ok, mình nói tiếng Việt, má nói lời cảm ơn của má đi.
Cảm ơn trong chương trình mời cho con tôi mời tôi tham dự, và đồng thời tôi cũng nhắn với các ông một câu là cái chương trình này cũng rất là hay, nhưng có một cái là cái chương trình này là nếu ai trồng được cây cối là người nó có đủ can đảm kiên nhẫn, phải là kiên nhẫn.
Con Nhật là
Thứ nhất là như vậy, cho nên nó sẽ là công bằng với nhau và thương nhau. Cái người trồng cái cây cối được là rất là thương nhau, tại vì con người nó phải liền với cái cây. Nếu mà trồng cái cây á,
con Nhật nhé.
mà một tuần thôi
Mình phải kết thúc.
mà mình không tưới cũng chết. Nói vậy được rồi.
My mom said, thank you, and she's really grateful to be here and for this conversation. It's really important in thinking about, you know, our roles in this work as planters, and that when you plant she said being a planter is like someone who creates relationships. You have to be present with your tree, and even if you go on vacation for a week, even if someone else is watering it, it will know that you're missing because it'll remember your smell. And that is a relationship. And it's kind of hard for me to sound like, because with COVID, that's the reason we're not in the same space right now. But cảm ơn mọi người đã cho mình tham gia, và I think my mom said it all for us. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah, and you know, apologies. My dad has several family members who are also sick, and I'm not sure, you know, how his world. He's quarantined in his own house too. But my language was taken from us. You know, that's one of the things that I think is still like just a hard burn, right? And I can guess that my native language would be Nawa. And I can tell you the word for joy in Nawa, because fortunately that language was preserved. But yeah, I also don't know Spanish very well, because the language was also, you know, beat out of my parents' generation, and we were forced to learn English. So it's that's the sad reality, right? I don't mean to bring everyone down, especially with such a beautiful way to end, with a word like joy. But I will say that, you know, I'm learning, and I think that's the charge that a lot of young folks are looking for and asking for. They want to know their language. They want to be able to express, you know, the words that don't exist in English. that we had in our own language that have been lost for so long. And that's, I'll leave you with that. Yeah. Omateo.
Desi? Is Desi
No,
there?
yeah. Right. Yeah. I think that Japanese is my native language, so I think if I had to leave with any word, it would be arigatasa. So that's the gratefulness and respect that we have towards what we have and what we will have and what we've had. And it's really simple. It's a common word, but I think that's something that I keep dear to my heart all the time.
Kalani? Okay, all the kids get along.
Kala ika hikina, ika moana, kamawana hohonu, ika leva, kaleva nu, ika hikina, ayakala, eyala e.
Hey, this is the way it is. The sun is in the east. It rises in the sky. It rises till it's overhead. See in the east. That's the sun. That's the way it is. We should all remember that. We should deal with things the way they are, not the way we wish they would be. That's what our grandparents would tell us. They would say, don't be lazy. Learn how to do what you need to learn how to do so you can feed the children, take care of the old people, and make sure the women are unafraid. Ayo.
Ayo.
Oh,
Taksamika. Taksamika. Julie, do you have a word?
As Kalol at the beginning, which is kind of halfway. I was trying to find a very short phrase in Ladino, which is kind of was the underground language for Sephardic Jews on their journey across the Atlantic. And it kind of roughly would be between kind of what is the idea between inclusiveness and joy altogether.
Okay. Alessandra?
Felicidad.
Thank you. Okay, all the children, get into the picture. Let's do a little bit of yay.
how about David? We
David,
forgot
I'm sorry, David,
Ah, I know, Mom here.
our godson. Come on.
Alito, search for your liwi liko, chata micha chikasha shia, hapishno momokadatin kanomi. Those are some old Choctaw words introducing myself, my tribe, and expressing relation. Real quick, as I'm called out, I feel two energies within me right now. I feel like I hold two medicines. One medicine is that of the planter, the person who establishes relationship with the plant, knowing that as the conditions change, the plant changes. And with relationship and generation, the people change and the plant and the people grow stronger together. And that is an act of joy and love and commitment. On the other hand, I carry a medicine more of war, of anger. As Ben Wisner mentioned in the chat, we're at a time where people are being killed by police forces. We're at a time when the government is institutionally putting its boot down on the necks of people who do not have the ability to fight or fend for themselves. And that makes me angry. And so I think we have to acknowledge that people walk with many medicines and many energies. So not just joy, but also frustration and anger and sorrow and desire for better days. Those also must be carried, all in one heart. Yakoke.
Taksamika. Please take a look at all these. Make noise, everyone, because I want you to all see these beautiful children. And this is what it's all about. Catalina, say hi.
Never say hi.
Alana.
Hi.
Sierra, Jaden.
Sierra has left the building.
All right.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for what an amazing experience.
Thank you. All right. God bless, and you all take care, and let's all work for a more just and beautiful world where everyone is cared for and everyone is loved. Mahalo.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Ooh.
Cảm ơn mọi người.
Thank you everyone.